Hi, I'm Pastor Horton. Welcome to this week's interview where we're joined by Andrew Gilsmith. Welcome to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Pastor Horton. It's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Um, I know we talked before about some really interesting stuff, and I'm super excited to get into that. But if you don't mind just introducing who you are to the audience.
Sure. So I'm Andrew Gilsmith. I'm a science fiction novelist, but I also, have a day job that pays the bills, like most novelists these days, right? I'm married to my wife Cheryl. I've got two boys, so I'm first and foremost a husband and a father. I'm a Roman Catholic convert. Came to it kind of late in life. We were talking about this earlier, but I was raised in a fairly religious family. Had some things happen in my childhood, just around the loss of my mother that kind of made me very angry at everybody and everything, and God probably above all. And I went on this, sort of quest to try to make myself an atheist. And despite my best efforts, I really couldn't do it. And it was, like most faith journeys, I think every faith journey is interesting,
Yeah,
honestly. So I had a faith journey, and it was interesting, at least for me. And it led me ultimately to the Roman Catholic Church. And I've been a convert for about 12 years.
it's incredible. Yeah, I guess a bit of behind the scenes. I've interviewed now close to 50 or 60 people, and every single faith journey is different, which
Mhm.
is why every time we start, I ask, can you introduce yourself? Can you give your testimony? Because that right there is the most important thing that we could talk about.
I completely agree.
So thank you for sharing that, first and foremost. Now, we were talking before about, science fiction and that kind of stuff and what that all meant. Do you want to just take us down your train of thought for that? And I'll come up with
Sure,
some questions.
sure. So, I've always loved science fiction, and I love some of the great, like particularly like the classic books in science fiction, Dune, for example,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I read that when I was young. It's one of those books that when you read it when you're young, it kind of just sticks in your brain, for your entire life. And other great ones too, Orson Scott Card's books, the Ender's Game series,
Oh,
Hyperion by Dan Simmons,
ooh.
um, A Canticle for Leibowitz, which is probably my favorite all-time favorite science fiction book. And if you haven't read it, it's a classic in the field. It was written in the late '60s, I believe, and it's basically like a kind of post-apocalyptic series of stories about a Catholic monastery that survives basically multiple world wars, nuclear wars. This kind of cycle that just
Oh,
repeats and repeats, and the monks try to preserve knowledge, which is of course, based on reality, just like the Irish monks preserved the knowledge in the Dark Ages, right? And after the fall of the Roman Empire. Um, and more recently, books like The Expanse by James S.A. Corey, which was also a television series. So I love science fiction. I love part of the reason I love it is because it's basically democratized theology in a lot of ways. I mean, it's this kind of open canvas. You're painting a future, and it's somewhat unconstrained, by the past. But as I've gotten older, I found myself liking it less and less because the message, whether intended or not, in so much science fiction, always seems to come down to this: the universe is vast, incomprehensible, and totally indifferent to human life. It's nihilism, right? I mean, kind of, made interesting. It's nihilism in pretty garb.
yeah.
And so I would finish a lot of these books, and not necessarily the ones that I just listed, but others, right? And I would say, man, that was great. That was a great book. Why do I feel so bad? Like I don't feel good after reading this. Why? And that's why. It's because I think it's based a lot of modern science fiction, most, maybe 99%, is based on false premises, right? a kind of false ideology that that everything in this reality is random, that it can all be explained by material phenomenon, that religion is a delusion, right? And that we are far more likely to be annihilated by an asteroid hitting the Earth sometime in the next 1,000 years than to meet our Maker after we die, right? And I just don't
Yeah.
believe any of that. Number one, and two, I think it's just terrible science. I think the science has moved. I think we're at the end of the era of materialism and
Hmm.
physicalism, and for science fiction writers to still be writing as if that is the only paradigm, the only worldview, right? That in which you can tell a science fictional story or tell a future oriented story is ridiculous. It's absurd. It is, I think, kind of on the same level as if people today were writing stories as if the Copernican view of the solar system were still accurate, right? So like there are most scientists, like the best scientists, the best physicists, the best people who are working on philosophy of mind, are coming around to the idea that space time itself is not the ultimate reality, that it might in some ways be an illusion or a projection. Even the quantum realm, which has, I think, radically overturned our the scientific understanding of the universe. Even that is not sufficient to explain reality.
Yeah.
What a lot of the people that I follow anyway in the scientific world say is that the fundamental substrate of reality is consciousness. That's what they call it. When I
Yeah.
hear that, I can't help but think you're calling it consciousness, but there is another word that you could use. You just don't want to use it, and that is God or spirit.
Yeah. And that's such a really cool premise to think of, is that, science is ever changing, right? I mean, we
Mhm.
we have it change all the time. People find out they're wrong. But like, so I told you before, I was talking to my boss today, and I said, I used to look at the world and look at these people who were religious and say, man, it's just crazy that they believe that a god made everything in, 7 days, and that's where everything came from. I mean, that's crazy. How could you believe that? And I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking, how could you not believe that? I mean, you look at it, they're saying the Big Bang happened, which was, oh, I forget, like a microscopic point of existence that suddenly, without any outside force acting upon it, which breaks the laws of physics, by the way, explodes into all of the matter that we know. Uh, that doesn't make much sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, to sort of just accept that at face value is, I mean, it's a kind of faith of its own, isn't it? I mean, you can't
Yeah,
possibly explain it, right? Like the average person can't explain it. They'll just say, "Oh, the Big Bang, whatever." Like, well, I mean, how is how is that any different or more sophisticated than people who would attribute reality to a creator?
I, in my opinion, it's less sophisticated
I would agree.
because
I would agree.
I've talked before with other, physicists and that kind of stuff, and they've explained things like the constants, like the gravitational constant of the universe, which I can't remember off of the top of my head. It's surprising, I know. Uh, it is so finely tuned that if it were just a fraction larger or smaller, life could not exist. It just couldn't. So to think that's one constant, and then you think about all the other constants, and you think about where Earth is in relation to the sun, in relation to all of the other celestial bodies. There's no amount of coincidence that could happen that could convince, like, you can't prove to me that this was not by design. There's no way. Just because there are too many coincidences for that to be true.
I would agree. And so, like, I mean, like at the end of the day, if you're going to, sort of accept that model of reality, then I guess, your God is coincidence.
Yeah.
right?
It's
It's
randomness. It's
right.
yeah, it just that to me, I can't do it. One, actually, two things that I thought of. First, one of the things I've heard of people saying as to like, oh, God couldn't have created everything in 7 days because we have carbon dating for materials back to billions of years ago. If God created everything in 7 days, why could he not have also created those things that are carbon dated to millions of years
Right.
ago?
That's right.
And then the other thing, which I did say I wanted to remember to talk about, you mentioned how scientists are starting to say that it's a consciousness, that everything is made up of this consciousness. There's a really fun psychology fact, which I'm not sure exactly how it fits in, but it's on my heart to share it, that the human mind cannot imagine a world without itself. So, for instance, like I explained to you, I could imagine a world where you didn't exist, right? That's fairly simple for me. But I cannot imagine a world where I don't exist because my brain has never known something different. And I can guarantee all of you who are listening or watching out there just tried and you're finding the same thing to be true. But I think that's just so interesting that they're saying consciousness or, the spirit in science lingo makes up the entire universe, and the human consciousness is so specifically wonderfully made that it can't believe or understand a reality without itself.
That's fascinating. I'd never heard that before you told me, but it's true. I mean, I was doing that little mental experiment myself, and couldn't do it.
Yeah, I
Um,
I have tried numerous times and it's just hilarious because every time I'm like, man, I just can't do it. But I mean, there's no way to. And I think that's really indicative of us being created in the image of God, because God has always been. And if you think about it, our consciousness has always been for us. God exists outside of space, outside of time, outside of all, you know, he exists, you know, in a separate dimension, if you will, just to say it in a certain way. We can't understand that, so we're bound by physical matter, by time, by space. And so we have never known anything without ourselves. Well, God has always been in the same way that to us, we have always been. I have never known an existence where I have not been. And I think that's a really cool connection to being made in the image of God. I don't know if that makes sense or
yeah, like I said, I'd never heard that. I'd never heard that before. But it is fascinating,
yeah,
right? I mean, because like our imaginations are so powerful, right? I mean, like
yeah,
we people can imagine almost anything. The idea that that's like maybe one of the one things that nobody can truly imagine is pretty fascinating.
yeah. I mean, the joke for a long time was nobody can stop you from imagining a rotating cow in your brain. And so of course I would do it, and when I'm bored sometimes I'll just imagine this three-dimensional cow spinning in my brain, which shows you again how powerful the human brain is. I can conjure an image of a cow spinning from nothing, but I can't imagine something without myself. And it's so incredibly cool. Um, yeah, I just there's so many connections like that I just love to get into.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, and again, I think the next 50 years are going to be interesting,
Hmm.
for better or for worse, because I do think that you're seeing the end of a pretty great long um, cultural and scientific cycle,
Yeah.
right? That probably began, in the Enlightenment. In fact, it almost certainly did. Um, some of the early Enlightenment thinkers, right, in fact, were aggressively pushing this idea of materialism, that everything can be explained through material processes, mechanical processes. But if you read their private letters, right, a lot of them will say things like, "We know this is absolutely ridiculous. We know that that everything seems to be rooted in some kind of consciousness, but we have to promote this ideology because it's the only thing that we can do to keep the church out of our business."
Yes.
Right? And so there was this division then that was created between the spiritual and the material, which had never happened before in Western in Western philosophy, right? I mean, it
No.
was metaphysics was the origin of theology and of physics, right? It was a unity, and they split it, and they did it knowingly. I mean, this is sort of the shocking thing. They did it knowingly, and they did it for very sort of self-oriented, selfish political reasons. And the great irony, I think, is that here we are 250 years later, and it's like they lock the door to the room, but now they can't get out of the room, right? And I find it interesting. I find it a little bit sad, and I
Yeah.
think you're going to see some. I think you're going to see some. Um, you know, some a little bit of intellectual violence as people come to terms with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to say something that I'm about to say because I don't want to label it. But I would stake money on the fact that those people who said, we have no basis for this, but we're going to say it to keep the church out of our business, that was demonically influenced.
I certainly wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I do believe in a spiritual reality. I believe, that the devil is real.
Yeah.
And I believe that the fallen angels are real. And I think that, they can influence human thinking and human behavior and certainly have.
Yeah.
So none of that would surprise me.
No. And I don't like to say things are demonic or stuff like that very often because that's a very slippery slope to get into. But with something like this, there's no real pro. Like there's no real benefit. The only thing you get is people walking away from the church. And to my knowledge, there's only one being that really wants that. And I mean, that's who it is.
Yeah. So in my book, the main character is an exorcist who was in his former life was a neuroscientist, right? And
Interesting.
he kind of had some experiences that led him to leave that life behind and join the church and ultimately become an exorcist. And the kind of starting point, the inciting incident in the book is these androids. It's about 250 years in the future. Androids start having what basically sounds like a religious vision, and most of the world just assumes that it's a hoax or they've been hacked or this is kind of a ridiculous thing that's happening. And then one of them shows up claiming to be possessed, and it asks for this exorcist by name, and that kind of
Oh.
sets the whole thing in motion.
So I guess since we're about out of time, do you want to plug more of that book? What's it called? Where can we find
Sure,
it?
sure. It's called Our Lady of the Artilects. Artilects are it's just like another word for android. It's going to be out on June 15th, and it'll be available wherever books are sold. And it's kind of like a supernatural thriller. Like I said, it's not preachy. There's a pretty heavy influence of Catholicism in it, of course, because that's my faith background. But there's
Yeah.
also a pretty interesting Islamic mystic character who plays a big role in it. And the central mystery is like, what is this real? Like, is God actually trying to speak through these beings? And what would it mean if one of them actually was possessed? Is there is there sort of a secular group, right? That's behind this, that's involved in this, and if so, like, what's their agenda?
Yeah. Awesome. So I will have all of the links to that in the description below. And by the time this comes out, that will have already released. So I look forward to reading it. It sounds incredible. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Pastor Horton. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we may have to have you come back because this
I'd
was
love to.
fun.
I'd love to.
To everybody else out there, please feel free to go check out that book again with the description below. I hope that you have a wonderful week, that you've enjoyed this message, and please remember to share this with others. Until next time, God bless.